What does world-class real estate look like to you?
Is a commitment to excellence when it comes to service.
It's do what you say you're going to do.
Estate agency that is delivering a really high level of service, customer service, a really high level of property marketing.
Being an all-rounder with regard to digital marketing as well.
Great agency belongs to personal agents operating in an entrepreneurial way, using tech, but keeping that personal touch and delivering first-class services for their clients.
Everything from service to marketing.
It's about bringing the absolute most that you can bring in any moment.
Really knowing who you are, knowing your lane, being really clear on your proposition and what makes you stand out, and then delivering that message relentlessly.
Thank you to Iceberg Digital for sponsoring the podcast and making all this possible. Hello and welcome to today's episode of the World Class Real Estate Podcast. As you know by now, my name is Mark. I'm joined by Mr. Ian Macbeth. How are you, my friend?
I'm good, mate. I'm good. You're looking very dapper today. Got your summer vibe on. Sunshine's out up there, is it?
Spring is here. We have some blue sky. The spring jacket came out last week. I'm doing some videos today, so I thought I've actually had to bring a spare jacket in the car today because I'm just going to try and block do a few of them. But yeah, I thought I'd make an effort. The only problem is that when we're recording this now, intro after the pod, and today's guest was looking very sun-kissed. I've obviously just been away as well. I've got a light jacket on with a very white face. I was feeling very beige, blending into this white wall behind me during that pod. But yeah, spring's come in. Feels like we're getting a little bit busier. I'm definitely a lot more positive than I was a few weeks ago. And yeah, I think business is going to be good, but it's going to be tough. And I'm well willing to do the hard work at the moment.
Hard work pays the bills. That's what it's about. I think when it is like this, I think I agree with you. I think after the Easter holidays, it feels like everyone's buckling down and getting ready to do the thing. And I do see that the pipeline seems to be improving. We're now in the months where the bank, Q1's always a tough one for banking, isn't it? But bankings are starting to come through, which is great to see. Pipeline, growing, which is also nice to see, or at least, staying in level with now the bankings are flowing. Listings are strong. I don't think any agents really got too many problems with the right type of listings, at least. And the market, when the sunshine comes out, it's better, isn't it? Doing a viewing in the sunshine when it's a little bit lighter in the evenings, and, you can get photography done later in the afternoon. It helps you out with a bit of pressure on your diary. Yeah. Estate agents are happier. People seem a bit more smiley now the sun's out, and let's get down to business, as the song says. But today, we're going international today, aren't we, Mark?
Yeah. Well, when I messaged today's guest on LinkedIn, today we've got Troy Malcolm from McGrath on the pod, and he was actually one of the inspirations for me starting this pod. I used to listen to his podcast, $1 Million Agent, that he does with John McGrath and Tom Panos, the Australian podcast. I used to listen to that when I used to go out running, and that was a big part of me putting the podcast on in the car before deciding to start this. So he has been. And then I think he came over, I think the year before COVID, to do some training with Stephen Brown, and they had a masterclass there whilst I was listening to various podcasts. And then he did another masterclass that I was involved in COVID as well, when he was doing a lot of training and development at McGrath. But a real inspiration and a real man with a positive mindset that knows what it takes to be successful in this industry and in sales generally, I think. And as you listen through today, as I said, we're recording this now after the actual episode, but I found myself nodding a lot, agreeing a lot with what he said as well. Very similar, I think, to our mindsets, is one of the things I would say.
Career-long estate agent that's climbed the ladder, started at the bottom, worked his way up through hard work, personal development, understanding the people in the business and the clients that the business wants to attract. Understanding relationships is a key part of it. And we have a phrase at Avocado, which is people before property. He mentioned people first mindset a lot. So yeah, I related a lot to what he was saying. And he loves it. You can tell that. He's enthusiastic.
If you're watching this on video or you're seeing any of the clips, you can see he leans forward. He absolutely loves it, doesn't he?
Yeah, Yeah, and we're going to ask some key questions around, why he decided to go into what he has done with the 3 offices. We're going to talk about what he sees happening with the future of estate agency over the next 12, 18 months, how to adopt AI. Going to also talk about, what a standard Australian office setup looks like in comparison to the UK, which I think people will find that very insightful, that particular section in the middle of the podcast as well. And obviously his background and story from, wanting to be a professional rugby player into becoming an estate agent as well. So very good episode. People are going to enjoy it. Shall we get him on the show, Mark?
Let's do it. If you're an estate agent listening to this, I want you to think about something for a second. Are you and your team busy, or are you actually being productive? Because most agencies right now are drowning in admin, juggling disconnected systems, chasing portal leads, and wondering why profits aren't where they really should be. Iceberg Digital have taken a completely different approach. Instead of selling another CRM, they've built what they call an AI operating system for estate agents, combining prospecting, marketing, CRM, compliance, even websites into one connected ecosystem. The goal? To increase your revenue per employee, because the agencies that win over the next few years won't be the ones working harder, they'll be the ones working smarter, with systems that actually do the heavy lifting. If you want to future-proof your agency instead of just surviving the next market shift, go and book a demo at icebergdigital.co.uk. That's icebergdigital.co.uk.
Troy, welcome to the show and thank you for coming on. How are you?
So well, thank you so much, Ian. Thank you, Mark, for letting me be part of it. I feel like, Mark, I've got family very close to where you are based, obviously out of the Northwest. And only recently I was over in the UK doing a couple of sessions with an amazing group of agents. So I'm super excited to be on the podcast with you today. Thanks so much for inviting me.
No, thanks very much for joining us. We'll start as we always do, Troy, with our opening question, the headline question. What does world-class real estate look like to you?
It's a great question. When you sent it through, I was like, okay, this is I can take this so many different directions. But I think world-class real estate fundamentally starts with relationships. I think people, relationships, and striving for excellence is something that, I think world-class real estate plays out anywhere in the globe. I think definitely throughout the UK and definitely throughout Australia and New Zealand, Southeast Asia is what we're seeing. That constant drive to create raving fans is something that, can't start without the relationships, and relationship starts with one. But if you do the right thing by people, then you can hold your head high and say you've got world-class real estate standards.
So that striving for excellence that you talk about in the practical office-based scenario, what, in your opinion, can you give any examples of the difference between good and the excellence that you're striving for?
Yeah, I think the reality of the world is constantly changing. You look at macro side of economics and what's happening around the globe right now, and you look at the micro in the local market. Fundamentally, it starts with what does the very best do? What are they doing on a daily basis? What are the habits? What is the discipline? What's the repetition that they're providing and the consistency they're providing their clients to really stand out? So an easy thing would be, a viewing comes up and you have someone inspect the property and, you wait 24 hours for them to come back with a recommendation of whether they're genuinely interested or not. What does it look like if you did it the same day? Here in Australia, we run a very strong marketing campaign segment of any property we take to market. What does it look like if you push that little bit extra and get a little bit more funds from the client and really making sure you're casting the net as far as possible? The simple approach and the standard approach would be just to take 6 photos and make sure you've got a floor plan and put it online. But what does it look like if you've got drone photography, or what does it look like if you've got video? And what does it look like if you're the agent talking and representing the property on the video? So I think it actually touches every single part of the real estate industry. We've highlighted a few things around inspections and marketing, but, even the way you hold yourself and conduct yourself in office. What does your personal brand say about you before clients even meet you? And I think all of those elements come together, and that's what makes the biggest difference in the standards of what does, excellence look like right now in 2026 throughout the world of real estate.
I liked the phrase that you used, Troy, raving fans. We in my business we have a phrase which is super fans. Can you build super fans through your personal brand, through your marketing, through your presenter-led videos, through getting off the fence with some of the content and almost being the news channel in your local marketplace? And we find that with that, Facebook groups and things like that, you end up with super fans, people that never even use the brand or the service. What does a kind of raving fan look like in your business? How do you build those? You know, obviously with marketing and service, I'm sure entwined, but is there a strategy behind building, you know, a raving fan?
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. I'd love to say that Ian, I was the one that keyed that term, but I got it from my very first mentor and still the founder and CEO of McGrath Estate Agents, where I currently work, John McGrath. And, he talks about raving fans a lot. And the reality is, for everyone listening to this, you don't need to have 1,000 raving fans. You actually only need 100. And they are people that only ever recommend you, not only for themselves, but for family and friends to use your services. That's when you know you've got a client for life. And I think if they're out there and they're your biggest advocate and they're spreading the good news about the service that you've provided and also the results that you provided, then the business becomes abundance, and you have that mindset where people come to you without even really prospecting. And I think everyone that's in real estate, they would love that. They would love having more opportunities for people coming to them as opposed to constantly trying to find a new business.
Yeah, absolutely.
You mentioned John McGrath, and I knew it wouldn't take very long for his name to come up. I know that you do the podcast with John and Tom Panos. And how important do you think it is to be successful? I would say in anything, but let's talk specifically real estate, to surround yourself with people like those two that are always driving the standards. And just how inspirational and important has John been for your career and your journey?
Yeah, well, I mean, he literally changed my life. I think that's fair to say. I've said that publicly before, and he had a bit of a laugh with me, but it's true. I started in the McGrath Estate Agents business very young. I was just turning 18. And John, in the early days, we were a very small private company. We had, I think, 3 or 4 offices and 200 staff across those locations. Today, McGrath Estate Agents has over 160 offices across the eastern states of Australia, from all the way from Townsville all the way down to Tasmania. And I think John's been the consistent figurehead of our business, and we're extremely lucky to have him. We're representing the McGrath brand throughout all of the Australian real estate agencies. We have the person that founded the business, but still operationally CEO, which is an extreme rarity. There's not many, if any, other real estate businesses at the size and scale that can offer that to their clients, but also their internal staff. The relationship between John, Tom, and myself, we started a podcast called $1 Million Agent in 2013, and it brought together the very best minds of real estate, both John and Tom, not me. I originally was like kind of the sound engineer in the background, and then as I moved more into the training space and got heavily involved with the strategy of McGrath, it was a natural fit to start being a talking head on that podcast as well. We're lucky as well. We get a huge amount of listeners that are very loyal through Tom's real estate gym, and obviously the McGrath brand, and John being the figurehead of probably real estate within Australia. But to answer your question, the reality of getting inspired by both those individuals every day is something that I don't take for granted. I think that they do the right thing. They deal in transparency and excellence, and they do the right thing in regards to integrity. And I think that that's shifted the Australian landscape. And I think that's both their legacies. I think that makes a huge difference when you talk about the very best of the best in regards to real estate. Both of those names come up, and the reasons are because people understand what they're about, and they believe in what they're saying, and they are inspirational in their approach, not only to business but also sales. Being salespeople, they both had extremely successful sales careers and numerous records and auctioneering records and things like that. So it's humbling to be associated with them. I probably take it for granted a little bit in regards to I get to speak to them whenever I need at the end of the phone. But what I don't take for granted is the impact that they've had not only on my life but the industry as a whole.
Yeah, I love that. Talking about mentors and obviously the impact in the UK, if you ask an estate agent or a real estate agent, how did you get into the industry? 80% of them would say, "Oh, I just fell into it. It just happened accidentally." So sort of bring it back a little bit and let's just talk about how you got into the industry and how your career has unfolded. Because, we were talking off camera about Eric and you're talking about the podcast and things like that. And it's amazing to see. But how did it all start and how did you get into property?
I wanted to be a professional rugby league player, of all things. And I started on the Northern Beaches, which is kind of a full circle moment, but we'll get into that a little bit later on. But I started there working 3 days a week and training for football. And that career took me to play for the Sydney Roosters in their junior grades very earlier on. And so that was where head office was based for McGrath Estate Agents. And so I moved into the city at that time and kind of continued that path, working closely, pretty much filling up photocopiers, running around, helping out whoever needed help at open for inspections back in the day, and then going and training in the morning early and at evening at night, doing the weight sessions and the field sessions. And then it got to a point where football unfortunately ended via injury, and naturally I fell into real estate. But it was always a strategic design. I always knew that the average professional footballer in Australia, if they're lucky, plays around 30 NRL games. So that's a very short career. A season, there's 28 games. So not many get to have their career play out. So I always knew there had to be something after football that I was going to go into. And I thought, what better industry to be in, not for the sheer fact that the properties were beautiful that we represent day in and day out, but also it was a people first industry. And I think, you take the property as the vehicle, but you really focus on those relationships. And I just thought, oh, well, it's kind of fun and I get to see people. And I did align very early with John and his values. And so that connection was there. And I think that actually held me in the early days of not wanting to go into another career or travel overseas and take a couple of years off.
Do you think because the kind of rugby background and the discipline and the commitment and generally sports, as a discipline as well, do you think that's something that's helped you? I know Mark's into his rugby and into his CrossFit. I'm into my distance running. Having that sporty background, I find having the discipline of committing to something is definitely something that helps for me in property. Do you find that in Australia with the team you work with?
Absolutely. It's second to none. There's so many great case studies of success around teamwork, and being, really disciplined in your approach and, getting up early in training or going for, I'd hate to think, Ian, how far you run on a weekly basis in regards to miles or kilometers. And you start to really understand, what it takes. And I think that it's easy to transfer those skills into a business like real estate. The funny thing about real estate, and this is what still gets, my team and myself motivated, is that we actually play more than we practice. And when you think about any elite sports person around the world, they actually train more than they play. So whether it's a distance running or whether it's CrossFit or whether it's, rugby league or rugby union or football throughout the UK, you think about the amount of hours that those individuals that are at the elite level put into training and preparing for a game. And then the game will only go for, 90 minutes, 2 hours probably if you're doing a marathon. For you, Ian, you're fast tracking.
Not that quick.
A 12-minute WOD for CrossFit. You think about, okay, so why do real estate agents constantly go out there and practice live on their clients? There's a fundamental shift, and the very best have realized that early on in their careers, and they spend so much time role playing, practicing their listing presentation, practicing overcoming objections, and that translates into success. And it's easy to see why the top 1% in our industry around the world, they've got those core values of discipline, consistency, not letting perfect get in the way of better, but also then training and training more than they actually go out there and practice live on their clients. But it absolutely has such an impact by having that background. But that background can also, if you haven't come from a sporting background, that can also play out to your favor in real estate as well. If you've been working in an environment where, the same approach of people first can work, whether it's a hospitality background or whether it's just dealing with people in a service level. That definitely speaks volumes for success in the industry as a whole.
Yeah, that's so flexible. So many opportunities for so many different styles of people, isn't there? You mentioned role play and practice to be better, not perfect. So how would you approach the type of person who enters the business who's really uncomfortable with the practice and the role play side of it? Because I still think it's something that's massively underutilized in any estate agent's business, mine included as well.
We all do it. I think everyone hates, you get judged in front of your peers more critical than you ever will in front of the public. That's the reality. So when you go out to a listing presentation or you're trying to appraise a property to get the business to represent that client, the chances are that's, they've only seen a couple of agents that have gone into that process, and, they might only do it 1 or 2, if they're lucky, maybe 3 or 4 times throughout their entire lives. Our colleagues, they do it every single day. Yeah. And so when you do that role play, they're going to pick up on the signals, they're going to pick on the key areas where you should be better or you miss something at one of those key points, and they're going to probably criticize you a little bit harsher. For anyone new into our business, we have a really, dedicated onboarding, program that takes them through the process of getting comfortable in being uncomfortable. So they get put in that scenario where they have to present. We have an assessment period where as well that we sit down with them and go, okay, prospect, list, negotiate, sell, those 4 key areas of any successful real estate sales business. Let's role play them. I've got, a test sheet that has, close to 90 criteria where we say, yes, they performed it and they excelled. No, they didn't mention it at all, or yeah, they did it, but they could deliver it better. And then the majority rules. And so you kind of get a real great sense of where they're at on their journey. We do that right up front for anyone starting in our business. And then we look at it 3 months down. Now, occasionally, I'd love to say that everyone buys into that strategy, but occasionally they don't. And so this little device, I say to everyone, right, and I did it with 2 of our really young gun agents. They're both in their 20s, early 20s, and they're just going to set the world on fire, but we want to guide them the right way. So I said to them, their homework is to record themselves 3 times on pitching the McGrath business. Imagine that I've just bumped into you. We're in an elevator together and you tell me your name and you work in real estate. And I say, right, so why would I select your company over anyone else right now in Australia? And, they have 3 takes, 3 opportunities. It's a minute recording and they've got to send that in. People sometimes feel a little bit more comfortable to the phone. But we do that twofold as well, because we not only want to know how they present and sometimes, what they're doing and how we can help them immediately, but we also do it so they can see themselves. Because again, the harshest critic on anyone is going to be yourself. So you've really got to understand your body language, the way you communicate, the tonality. The words don't so much matter to me. It's more about how they present themselves, how they engage, and what action are they trying to cause? Are they, leaning into the conversation, or can you tell that their voice is not really engaged? Can you tell they're hesitant? Can you tell they're nervous?
Yeah,
get them in early.
Get them in early. Absolutely.
Set that, and then it's just normal if they want to survive in the business, right?
Yeah, correct. And not everyone loves it. I don't love it. It's what we do. It's what we do, and it's what makes us better. It's like going to the gym. I'm sure if you lined up 100 people and you said, right, we're going to the gym this morning at 8 a.m., probably 60-70% of them would be like, it's too cold, I'm going back to bed. And the other 30 would go, and then 20 would kind of, walk around and go on the treadmill for 20 minutes. And then the others would actually really lean into it and develop and get that skill level. And that's the 10 or 15% that we're looking for.
You mentioned, Troy, then 2 young guns in their 20s, ready to set the world on fire, as you say. And I'm just interested to know what the difference in generations are. I'm 42. I've been in this game now for 23 years, and you see different types of generations coming into the industry. Some estate agents in the UK would say that we're struggling with some of the younger generations over here to have the same maybe work ethic and engagement, and it's just different. And I've got young kids, so I'm trying to see it from different spectrums. But how are you finding the different generations in Australia, and in particular, obviously the 20-year-olds coming into the game now?
So fun. So fun. Yeah, every day is different. I mean, we're in my business right now, we've got 53 people in the 3 offices that I own on behalf of McGrath Estate Agents, and we have our youngest employee is 17. And our oldest employee, I'm sure they won't mind me saying, is they're going to hit 70 this year. So they're going to celebrate their 70th birthday. They all work completely different. But I think what's most important, looking at the different generations, take the generations out for a second, the individuals, everyone has a different understanding of what they want to achieve. So I think for any business owner listening to this podcast, first of all, start with, why is the goal important to them? What is the goal they're trying to achieve? And don't just try and set a goal based on income to the business. And don't just set a goal on a number of transactions, because that individual, if they don't have the why associated with that, then they're just going to be striving for a number that you've given them. So we step back and we kind of go, well, based on your performance, we feel like, you had a great year. Are you happy with your year? Perfect. What does that mean for you? What does that mean for your family? What do you want to achieve in the next 12 months? Outside of work? Is it a renovation? Is it a holiday? Is it a new car? Whatever that is. And it doesn't have to be materialistic, but most people, I want to go overseas to Disneyland, or I want to go on, a trip to, the Whitsundays, or whatever that may be. But how do we help them achieve that? Because if they achieve that, then everything else is figure outable in work. So we always start with the individual as a first, and then we will look at the generation. We're very fortunate. We've got a really strong female-led business. Two of the partners in the business are females. We've got, a number of them that have young children and a number of them that have teenage children. And so we provide that flexibility for them to do what they need to do outside of work, and dads as well. We've got single dads with children as well. We allow them that flexibility, but we also make sure that when they are in the office, we take away all the obstructions and all the challenges to allow them to do their best work. So when they're in, we know that they're super driven to achieve excellence. And when they're out, we try and stay out of their way. We try and make sure that they have that time with family to really focus on that. That then flows on to the generations, because we also know the younger generation, they want to be embraced, they want to be mentored, they want to be given the opportunity. But they also want to be rewarded for the activity they produce. Whereas a lot of our older generation style or more experienced agents, they don't mind a little bit more of strict feedback and focused on the numbers. Whereas if we tried to implement that in some of the younger team members, they'd zone out within a couple of minutes. And so the way we cater for them, first and foremost, is the individual, but then we kind of have a couple of layers to make sure that we're not missing anyone. And our leadership team sits at 5 at the moment across those 3 offices. So 53 key team members and 5 of those leading those 3 offices. We try to touch everyone as much as possible and get involved in their lives, but we also make sure that because of what they're trying to achieve, it's easy for us to share that goal back to them to see if they're on track or off track.
Yeah, it makes sense. It goes back to what you said about relationships, not just relationships with clients, but obviously relationships with the team and understanding what their priorities are and what's important to them. And like you say, not everyone is focused on money. If you do have, young kids, your priorities shift, and money is important, but also time and the ability to be a little bit flexible as well. I'm interested to know, because of the numbers you're talking about there with the 3 officers, what does a sort of standard Australian office look like in terms of roles and team, and what are the kind of, not necessarily the job specs, but what's everyone doing in the average sort of Australian, or with your team? Let's take one of your top performing officers, for example.
Yes. So great question. We kind of have a philosophy that we should service sales, leasing, letting, and also management or marketing across every office. So we have representatives that cover those 3 key streams across each office. Out of our head office, our largest office, we have finance, HR, and a lot more of the management structure that really looks after billings, marketing expenses, those types of things. But per office, you can go anywhere from a smaller office in Australia right now probably has 3 or 4 team members. Most of our offices, we're sitting at about 12 to 15 staff working out of of those offices. It's normally a mix of senior agents and then associates. So associates are ones that are really growing their business, or they're working closely with that agent and they're doing the individual inspections or viewings. They're performing any of the building remedial works. So they're going out and making sure that if there's any maintenance or preparation to be done, photography appointments, they're executing on all of those. But we feel like the balance of having that full service offering out of each office is incredibly important. And most of the successful offices throughout Australia do offer those three elements.
And for us, how we would have an office with, let's say, 12 people, you'd have a branch manager, a number two, then you maybe have 2 or 3 valuers that go out and do the listings only, don't do viewings, just listings, maybe a junior one and 2 seniors, then a sort of batch of negotiators registering applicants, and a senior one that kind of runs the desk, a couple of junior ones that are kind of, like you said in the early days, that we've all done leaflet drop in, photocopier, teas, etc. When you say associate, are they self-employed estate agents, or are they employed as well?
A bit of a mix. So most of the slight difference between, I guess, the UK and what we see in Australia is that we have, I guess, individual agents that go out, do the listing presentation, will do and perform the open for inspections or viewings, and then negotiate the sale and execute the sale. So it's kind of the pod looks after all 3 elements of that, and we have those pods broken up. So we will have 3 or 4 of those pods work in each one of the offices. And so they will handle the majority of that. The branch manager will normally be the sales leader or the office manager. So we always have that representative. But they would mix anywhere. So each one of those pods would probably mix between doing 20 to 120 odd sales per year. So quite a broad range. Some of them are higher price points, the pods. But they would cover all of those things that you mentioned. We don't necessarily have a team just dedicated to the negotiations. And that's just a legacy thing throughout Australia. I know that's the slight difference that I learned many years ago, I think early 2020, when I was last over, very first session over, doing the training with the masterclass throughout. But it's similarities, but very different in their approach into, that distinct role. We like to see our agents kind of go from the start of the journey all the way through to the completion.
I'm a big believer in the same. We built our business my current company based on exactly that, is giving the client that single point of contact. Because I do think it's one of the things that we struggle with in estate agency in the UK is the different departments result in a breakdown of communication, and that's the recipe for disaster if you get communication wrong. So that pod model, I think a lot of people will take a lot of value from that, because if you've got the right talented person that's been doing it for long enough and they can do all of it, and they're not under pressure to do it at volume as well, then ultimately the client's going to get a good result. And for the associate, I'm sure they're well paid for that in the pod as well. So, that's great to see. Talk me through, Troy.
So I was just going to say, the other thing is that, it goes back to what we started, this whole conversation around, was relationships first. And so, you've got to think of what was the client want. The client sometimes, and most of the time, I think, would get confused if they're talking to, different people along the way. Whereas if they have that one key person and that relationship, it definitely makes a huge difference in, how they perceive the whole transaction playing out as well.
Were you going to say something, Mark?
Yeah, sorry. I was just gonna ask a question in terms of your role, because that's changed in recent years, and you mentioned the offices and the business ownership. So I'm really interested to hear about some of the challenges and achievements and how you've found that process, because there will be people listening who are thinking of going themselves, opening up and doing their own thing. How has that process been for you, and what have been some of your biggest learnings throughout that journey? Because it's quite recent that you've taken over those offices, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. Mark, it's every day is a lesson. Like I have this amazing journal that I got gifted, and a dear friend said, "Hey, listen, for the first 12 months of embarking on this venture, write down every lesson and every learning." And so there's this diary that's just getting full of all these amazing ideas that hopefully one day I'll pass on to someone and they can Yeah, or publish it. Maybe publish it. I don't know how many people would read it. Have to self-publish through Amazon, no doubt. But it's been an amazing journey. So for those that I guess I haven't had the chance to sit down with, or they haven't seen any of the podcasts or whatnot, I started with McGrath very early on in my career. As I said, 17. I kind of grew through the business, had a number of different roles. Launched the Victorian operation for McGrath in 2016. So we opened 13 offices there. I was employed by the company to do that. So that was a lot of travel. Came back and was the head of learning and development for the business for an additional 3 years. And then took a little bit of time out. The business structure had changed a little bit. So took 12 months out and became the director of sales for a competing agency. And then John stepped back into the CEO role of McGrath and decided to return as the director of sales. And so for the last 4.5 years, I was the director of sales again across the entire McGrath business. Part of that remit, it's a bit of a hybrid model. McGrath retained a number of those offices that were personally owned by the business. And so my responsibility was not only to do the things across the entire network of offices, but to run the 25 key stores that were owned fully by McGrath. We had 250 odd agents working out of those 25 offices. It was a big undertaking. It was across 2 states, so across New South Wales and Queensland. So a lot of travel, and it was reporting through to the board. And then we got to a point where the business strategy slightly changed, where we became privately owned again. And we had an acquisition by Knight Frank. So we're very fortunate to have the amazing Knight Frank as shareholders in the McGrath business, and also another amazing company, which is the kind of the equivalent of McGrath throughout New Zealand, which is a company called Bailey's. And so they are both very active in our business day to day. And they're incredible. The lessons and the learnings, both from throughout the UK and the representation that Knight Frank have, but also Bailey's across the key areas and the blue ribbon locations throughout New Zealand. They've added the X factor and the global reach to our business that really takes it to a whole new level. So part of that process was that when they came into the business, they were looking and identified a number of key areas that they were looking for investment by individuals. They know that localized leadership to really drive not only performance but reputation and the brand throughout key areas was something that they wanted to achieve. I'm a 4th generation resident of the Northern Beaches. So my family has been there for over 120 years. And many of, our family members are still there. And so the opportunity presented itself to acquire 3 neighboring BDA locations that were once the company-owned structure. And so I went through that process with the business and their endorsement, and then acquired them in October last year. And they were successful businesses already, but doing the acquisition and moving into that role has been, a highlight of my working career, and definitely a highlight of my career at McGrath. But it's enabled me to get a lot of lessons and a lot of learnings. There's a difference between, having a stretch of offices, 250 key staff that you're trying to get in contact with or working closely with, but, just by nature, there's a lot of people to see and a lot of people to get engaged with, and really refining that down has been probably the most rewarding, just developing those deeper relationships with the individual staff and seeing their individual wins on a daily basis is super exciting. You get exposed to a lot as well. So those local communities, being back entrenched with those communities, has really enabled me to get better insights into what our clients like, and the way that, it's transacted in those locations. For those that don't know, Manly, the Forest and St Ives offices, they're about 20 minutes north of the CBD, just on the other side of the Harbour Bridge. So beautiful locations, beachside suburbs, beautiful leafy green suburbs, and price ranges that range from, apartments at, anywhere from 750,000 Australian dollars, up to, we're representing properties that, are in excess of 10 million Australian dollars right now. And so it's a really diverse area. It's a mix of investors. It's a mix of owner occupiers. There's generational wealth there as well. But there's also families that have been in the family home, and they've been there for 30 or 40 years. And so taking them on that journey and the downsizer market in that particular location or those three areas is something that is a trend in Australia right now. They're looking to have level access. A lot of these properties they built in the 70s and 80s, and they're beautiful and they're big and they're 5 bedrooms and they've raised all their children there and they've been extremely successful. And now it's time to downsize to the apartment where they're close to the amenity, they're close to transport, they're close to hospitals and infrastructure. And so going through that journey and seeing them achieve huge success and selling the family home, but also the emotional side of that is incredibly rewarding. But again, every day is a lesson, because you think you understand what's important to that individual, and then you get through the process and you realize that the outcome wasn't important. It was the emotional side of things and moving on that was what was the trigger point for them.
Yeah, totally.
Much more hands-on. I can see how much you're enjoying it with your face just as you're talking about it. Is there any? And I'm just conscious of time running towards the end now, Troy. Is there any one particular challenge that you can talk about in that first 6 months of ownership and how you overcome it? If there's something that springs to mind or that you're happy to share.
Yeah, I think happy to share anything. I think the biggest one was first of all understanding, with a people first mindset, understanding our team, understanding what made them tick. So even though I knew 99% of the individuals working out of those offices, because we've employed a number of staff as well, even though I had relationships with them, they were surface level relationships. So really understanding what was important to them was first and foremost, and that was probably the challenge, is because I was disappointed the fact that I didn't know them as well as I probably should. But 6 months in, I'm extremely proud of knowing about them, what makes them, excited, what gets them inspired, those types of things. I think the other side of the business is understanding, I've always been in the sales side. I've always been driven by the sales side of the business. So having exposure to the management side of the business, I realized very quickly that to be successful in that space, I needed to get the right people around me. And so I'm incredibly humbled that, I've identified and recruited key talent in those roles that, they do that day in and day out, and they've all had extremely successful careers. So to see that side of the business performing at a level that was never anticipated in the first 12 months is probably the most exciting, but it was also the most challenging, because I had to let go. I had to let go of what I thought I knew about that side of the business and focus on what my skill set was, which I think a lot of leaders, to be honest, Mark, a lot of leaders struggle with, a lot of business owners struggle with, is they think that, they're the business owner, they should be across all the detail. I'd challenge them in 2026. This is a huge industry, and very, very lucrative if done correctly. You need to have the right people that are specialists in each one of their key areas to perform at that level that is excellence. You can't be expected to be an individual and try to be a jack of all trades. It just doesn't work in 2026.
Yeah, you've got to know which. I think as the leader. So we've had someone called Mark on the show, Mark Burgess, that runs a company over here, tech company, and he always says that as the leader, you've only got one job, and that is to steer the ship. Everyone else has to make the ship do what the ship needs to do. You just need to know that this is the direction we're going in, and tell everyone else that that's the direction we're going in. And I think
to a point, Ian, as well, to a point that people get sick of me telling them the direction we're going, because they're like, we've told us. And it's like, good, it's working. You understand where we're going.
Until you change it.
Until you change it, yeah. I'm only allowed to do that once a year. That's my leadership team say you can only change once a year. I'm like, okay.
And I remember when we started our business nearly 6 years ago now, that starting it from a cold start, I was obsessed with learning everything and doing everything myself. And me and my business partner were just doing everything. And then as you start to employ people, you almost resist what at the time you would phrase as a cost of bringing talent in, because you think, well, they can't do it as well as me and I can do it, so I'll save the money. But then I sat down with someone at a table at a mastermind who gave me some great insight into it. And he said, if you can afford to do it and the time is right to do it, then it's a reward on your time, because it releases you to do something else as the business owner that you enjoy doing more. And ever since then, I've always seen it as a reward when we get to employ someone in a new role, because it's an expansion and it allows the release of time into a different area that someone enjoys, and they probably enjoy that role more than I do ultimately anyway, or the person that they're coming in to replace does. So it gets exciting at that point. What do you think the sort of next steps are for estate agency? We're in this crazy world at the moment economically, but also from a tech point of view. You know, AI is obviously the buzzword, but AI is now kind of almost at this phase 2 where actually it's not just AI in one box. There's so many different ways that it can integrate into estate agency. And you showed us your iPhone earlier, and it's incredible what you can just do on your phone, you know, these days. But how do you see the next 12, 18 months unfolding for real estate in Australia?
Yeah, it's we're in a shifting market in most of in Sydney, we're in a shifting market. Obviously those macro level events that are happening around the globe are having an impact locally. We're seeing that play out in most geographic locations. Costs of living, our interest rates are starting to increase. So we've seen that since a couple of months ago. So that continues to play to the media. The media is obviously doing their best to educate, but also, they get paid for the drama. And so leveraging that drama out there in the world of real estate has probably had a bit of an impact on both buyers and sellers making decisions. There's still a lot of property to transact, but I think what we're going to see play out definitely over the next 12 to 18 months is great property is always going to perform well. I know that, the days on market throughout our regions that we operate in, we've gone from, I think, 38 to 45 as an average from list to advertise to sell via auction or private treaty, which I know around the globe people will be like, oh my God, I would love to sell a property every 40 days. Cause I know that, it's a little bit of the Australian way, but it hasn't significantly changed. We're still seeing, great prices for homes. We're still seeing relatively buoyant numbers of attendees going through, our 45-minute open for inspection times. We perform those twice a week, a midweek open and a Saturday open. The ways that we're seeing AI play out are mixed and varied. The luxury about real estate is that people first. I really strongly believe that element will never come away from the transaction. So for everyone that's in the industry, that's a great thing. We're not going to get outsourced. Who would have ever thought engineers and coders would have been outsourced, 3 or 4 years ago? And now that seems to be the main AI disruption that we're seeing, especially throughout, places like Atlassian and things like that have had redundancies, in the thousands, which is quite scary. But I think for real estate, we're in a really good spot. I think people need to not get too excited about AI. AI will continually impact our industry, but it's an enabler. It's not a disruptor. And I think that those that embrace the technology and learn and understand how to use it will definitely see the benefits of it. Those that turn around and say, I don't want to know anything about it, you are going to be left behind, unfortunately. I heard, I can't remember who it was. I was listening to a podcast. It was someone that was quite vocal about it, to say that the disruption point of AI is the equivalent of what it was like pre and post the launch of the internet. And you think about the way that real estate was transacted pre-internet, with photos and newspapers and window displays. And you think about the launch of the internet and the way that that's evolved and how much that's scaled up in recent times, where, we know that the main source of inquiry that we get is via the main real estate portals. We know that people always go on their phone if they're in a new location to see what's happening in real estate. AI is probably going to have the same impact, but that's over time. Like, the internet has taken 23 years to get to the level that it is. And while I'm super excited and we're in testing and measuring everything we're doing with AI, we are having a really calm approach, and we don't want to rush into anything, because we do believe people first, and we think that the disruption point will come, but we just need to have an awareness around it. We don't necessarily need to be the leaders in it.
Yeah, you don't need to get obsessive about something until you kind of see it play out. Let the mistakes happen and then kind of pick up the pieces.
Yeah, well, make mistakes as well. I think that's the nice thing about AI. You can trial things and make mistakes, but the reality is, just test and measure. I think this is a really important time in real estate around the globe, because you want to make sure that your clients understand that the way that AI works, it should be an enabler to the industry. It shouldn't be a detractor, or it shouldn't take business away from you. I did see recently there's a lot of ads that are coming up on Instagram and Facebook, and there's AI calls that are coming out, outbound calls. I've banned that from my team. I've absolutely said no. Your clients have a relationship with you. If you have Amy or whatever her name is calling from an AI bot doing an outbound call, you're not in real estate. So fundamentally, what do? We engage with people, we develop that relationship, we guide them, we educate them, we take them to market and achieve premium results for them. We don't outsource to technology to see if we can get another transaction. It's just not the way. It's not our business model. I know there's business models out there that do it that way, but it's just not something that I'm interested in. But will the technology get better in the future, and will we look at it? Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Facebook version 1 or iPhone version 1 to 17 or 18, whatever up to now, is completely different.
Yeah.
So it's going to happen, but you've got to embrace it.
Worlds apart, absolutely. And just to kind of summarize, you've obviously been in the training space. You've mentioned, some of the people that you class as a mentor and that you work with and podcast with, etc. And I'm sure you've had some phenomenal guests on there. But if there was a mantra or a single piece of advice for real estate agents around the globe, is there anything that comes to mind that kind of you've had a moment where someone said something to you that was a piece of magic, or you have something that you say to the team that you kind of live and die by?
Yeah, there's quite a few. That's a great question. Thanks, Ian. You've stumped me.
It's always hard on the spot.
You thought you were getting away then. You thought it was about.
Yeah, I thought I was like, hey, this was crazy. I was good wrapping up. Got me. No, so listen, people first. I can't say that enough. That's the most important part of our entire industry. Relationships can speak volumes about not only your personal brand, but also your brand's brand. I think building a personal brand, embracing technology, embracing AI, embracing social media, embracing video, that is going to set you apart. But at the end of the day, like, remarkable service, absolutely remarkable service, and raving fans. If you nail those two things as a mantra, if you provide remarkable service to everyone you interact with, and you create raving fans, you're going to have the best time ever in this industry, because it rewards those people that provide an outstanding service. But also, if you've got business coming to you, if you've created those raving fans, if you've got business coming to you, knocking on your door, then it's a really, really exciting industry to be in.
Yeah, love that. And maybe an easier question: if people in the UK want to kind of follow yourself on one of the socials, pick up some tips, see what you're doing, what's the best platform, and how can they do that?
Yeah, Instagram. I'm all over Instagram. Very easy, at Troy Malcolm. It's very original. Troy Malcolm. Follow me there. But also $1 Million Agent with John and Tom. I think, we kicked off in 2013 with that podcast. It's the longest running in Australia. We get huge amount of volume, huge amount of listeners. I'd love to say come and listen to me, but you're tapping into two of the most remarkable minds in the Australian real estate industry. Just watch, listen, play back the episodes. And the great thing, the most humbling thing about that podcast and everything we're doing is, we don't earn anything from it. It's like you guys, like, as much as we would say, being a podcaster is really beneficial financially, you don't get anything. But, the legacy that I'm lucky enough to be part of both John and Tom and they're creating is something pretty special. And, we get messages from around the world saying I'm at episode 10 back in 2014 and the message is still relevant. Like, that stuff's pretty cool. That, makes me excited about what the future of this industry is like. And, it does weed out the ones that are doing it wrong, and it really focuses on doing great business and creating, that huge benefit of, raving fans and clients for life.
Yeah, I think podcasting is amazing, and it's an amazing tool. It's the Red Bull to knowledge. You can get there so much quicker now with podcasting. So yeah, that'd be a great place to go and check out. Thank you, Troy. Me and Mark have very much enjoyed it. We obviously get our own personal development from being a host and asking the questions. So thank you very much for coming on the show. Really appreciate it.
Pleasure. Hopefully that was up to the standard. I've listened to a few of your episodes today. I actually found the YouTube clips, and I was like, hey, this is cool. I'm going to be listening to more.
Love that. Thank you.
A massive thank you once again to Troy Malcolm from McGrath Real Estate for joining us. We said on the intro, Ian, inspirational, full of energy, full of passion. But I do think that's one of the things that I would take away from that is there is a real. He's very inspiring, but I also really loved his advice on practice or role play, whatever you talk about. We've heard Stephen talk about it at our masterminds, or if you listen to been involved in any of his trainings, that professionals practice in private. And I think part of that may have come from Troy's, but that advice on role play and actually him talking us through their induction process, if you want to call it that, and getting them to do that really early, I thought that was my little golden nugget, because something that I struggle with and we struggle with as a business, to be perfectly honest. How do we integrate it? And his thing is like, integrate it at the start, and if they don't want to do it in person, get them to do it on the phone first. And it's just a small little tip, but it's very practical, and actually I think it's something that would make a big difference for a lot of businesses.
Yeah, I've every time I talk to Australian real estate agents, or I watch a seminar or training, I always afterwards digest the same thing, because I'm very proud of the UK, and I know that we've got some amazing estate agents, and I think we've come a long way since COVID with our social media, our video, our marketing, our branding in the UK. And I almost go into these calls or into these conversations a little bit like, we're good. We're good at what we do. But the one thing that I always take away is how weak we are when it comes to training, and really like client first focus as well, like really attention to detail, touch points, building those relationships. I do think that's something that the UK can really take a lot from those real estate agents. Even if we're more advanced in different areas, they've got that part down to a T, I think. And that's the takeaway that I could see here is, if you are, I think he said, you'll get judged more by your peers than you ever will by your clients. So make the mistakes in the training. Absolutely. So you don't make the mistakes in the showroom. That's the big takeaway for me. I also loved what he said about the pods in the offices. How those associates work. And I think that's something that for me in the UK is how we improve the industry, and how we crack the self-employed traditional agency sort of balance, and making sure that clients get the best experience. I think that's how we can make that work, is if officers just work around that single point of contact service level, really. I think that was a big takeaway for me for the traditional agents that are listening.
Yeah. I think that's, again, just a slight deviation, but just a practical thing that you can do and just amend. And actually, I think improves, which is something he talked about in the answer to his very first question, improves the service that we're giving to our clients. And also in that question, he answered about relationships, but it wasn't just a soundbite. He then proceeded to talk. He gave us loads of time, didn't he? He was probably on for 55 minutes. He then proceeded to talk throughout that time about relationships, people first. That was the mantra that kept coming through with it. People first, relationships, both internally, getting to know his team. And that was interesting about his move into business ownership, getting to know people on a real level, but also externally. And he really verified that when he was talking about AI and saying how, outbound calling, for example, is damaging the relationship that we have with our clients. And I thought that was, that's someone walking the walk, not just talking the talk, in my opinion.
Yeah, and he's very humble as well, for someone that's got such a strong personal brand globally in the property game, and does some phenomenal stuff, obviously, with some very high profile events over there, and the podcast, the big podcasts, over there as well. Very humble in how he came across with Tom and John, and where his beginnings started and where he's got to. So yeah, really enjoyed it. Really, really nice guy. Some top advice. Very good podcast. And loved having someone from over the seas, come over and talk about their marketplace as well. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, definitely a highlight so far this year. So massive thank you once again to Troy for joining us. As you know, we do this because we love our industry. We want to see it improve and get better. If you have enjoyed today's episode, please share it with colleagues, share it out on social media, reach out to either Troy, Ian, or myself. Thank you very much for listening, and we will see you again next week.